Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is John with Murder by the Book coming to you live from my living room for another virtual event. Tonight, we're super excited to have Stan Parish with us to talk about his novel, Love and Theft. And we're really excited to have Pete Nowalk with us to moderate the discussion. So real quick, Stan Parish is the former editor-in-chief of The Future of Everything at the Wall Street Journal and the author of the novel Down the Shore. His writing has appeared in GQ, Esquire, the New York Times, and the New York Times Magazine, among other publications. Pete is a creator and television showrunner with a passion for telling unique and interesting stories with complex characters that keep audiences on the edge of their seats. He's a showrunner for How to Get Away with Murder. He's worked on Scandal, Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, and he co-wrote and published the Hollywood Assistant's Handbook with Hilary Stam. In 2016, the Point Foundation honored him with its annual award for the Point Leadership Award for his career achievements in support of the LGBT community. So how are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great.
I'm doing great too. I apologize for making you read all that entire biography. I should edit that.
I edited it down a little bit. So
listen, you're an accomplished guy. You can just lean into it. That's great.
So if you guys are watching live on Facebook, if you have any questions for Stan or Pete, you can drop them in the comments below. I am going to pop away for a little bit and let them chat, and I will come back in a little bit to relay the questions. So you guys have fun, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Great.
Thank you.
John. Stan!
Pete, what's going on? I
I'm just
still haven't seen it
here the whole time.
I have not held the paper copy in my hand. I don't even know what it looks like or feels like. They won't ship one to me because I keep moving around Europe.
Yeah, and thus we don't really feel bad for you because you're living all of our dream. Everyone out there, if you need advice about how to live in the time of Corona, you go to Stan Parish, who conveniently decided to go to Italy. I thought it was the craziest time in the world. It was like beginning of June, right?
It seemed like a bad idea at the time.
It seemed like the worst idea. I would never have gotten on a plane. And meanwhile, you're just living la vida loca in Europe.
And he never came back. No, he is coming back, just not yet. But I didn't get to be in America to see the book come out, which is kind of a bummer. But yeah, Europe has been kind to me. They got their act together with this coronavirus thing.
They really did. And you're right to be there, and for all of us. And also, it's so appropriate that you're there because so much of your book is sort of travel porn. That's why it is such a great book for the summer. And I'm so glad it came out in the summer. And everyone who's stuck at home, like, this is the perfect book to just travel around the world. We go to Vegas, we go to New Jersey, which had some surprises for me.
Mm-hmm.
We go to Tulum, and then a bunch of brilliant Spain, right?
Yeah, actually not far from where I am. I'm in Barcelona right now, but the last part is set in Marbella in southern Spain.
Yeah, this whole book has, I just gotta tell everyone, like, the most amazing settings. It moves fast, it's a thriller. We're gonna talk all about it. But if you need to just escape and feel like you're in these wonderful locations, read the book. And please, I hope to God someone in Hollywood is buying the rights to this, because it would make the most kick-ass, escapist, fun movie starring amazing people. So,
we're working on it.
Yeah, we're working on it. Great. All right. So before we start about talking about this amazing book, again, Love and Theft, just buy it everywhere you are. Stan and I have known each other for a little over a year, and we met in a really random way.
Really random.
We went to a retreat. Let's call it the retreat. And we
not rehab, just to clarify.
Yes,
everyone assumes when you and I say we went to a retreat, everyone's like, oh, they were drying out. No, it was not rehab.
Unfortunately,
Psycho-spiritual retreat. Yeah.
Psycho-spiritual, yeah. And what's so cool about this story is it's a place where you're not allowed to talk about what you do, and you're also assigned a roommate. So I get to the check-in and they're like, your roommate is named Stan. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to be in a room with like a 78-year-old snoring, farting old man in the bed next to me. I walk into this tiny little cabin and room, and I haven't had a roommate in 10 years, thank God. And there is standing Stan, this wonderful vision that you're all seeing in Spain right now. And we had on the same exact shoes
The
Same
same
exact.
slate gray common project. It's not like we
Yeah.
were both wearing, black chucks. Like it was a very
Very
particular shoe
specific.
choice.
And I was like, okay, this is better than the old farting man. But what was fascinating about this, I want you to actually talk about it for all the writers out there. You went because of this book, and not in a good way. This book a year ago, I've never seen a sadder person than Stan Parish. Will you tell
other
everyone?
factors also, but yeah.
But so eventually we broke the rules at the retreat. I think 4 days in, and we're like, "What do you do? What do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm a writer," and you're like, "I'm a writer."
We didn't break the rules. I had a sneaking suspicion, and you looked at me and you were like, "You're a writer, aren't you?" And I was like, "You're also a writer." And you were like, mm-hmm. And then we didn't break the rules any further. We got no more specific than that.
That's true. But I did find out that one of the things you were struggling with was, I guess you call it writer's block.
Yeah. Or ending fatigue, or whatever you would call it.
Yeah. And I never read your first ending, but I think it's important that we talk about this process because there's so many writers out there that go through this, and like people only see the finished product. But when I met Stan, you were just like, I sold this book. I got to give back the money. I can't do it. I can't figure out the ending. And I was like, well, don't you already have an ending? Didn't they buy it? And you were like, yeah. And I was like, well, forget about it. Cash the check, go to Spain, put out that ending. I don't care if it sucks. Just like take it. And you, for months after that, you really tortured yourself. And so talk about that for people, like why you felt so important that it was that you rewrote the ending.
It just, it wasn't there yet. I sort of had a vision of what it could be, but the vision, it was a long way from the execution. And it just took a minute for me to work it out. And there was, a lot of discussions that you and I had. You really, helped about overall narrative arc. Yeah, we can drink to that, I think.
Cheers.
And I just had a vision of it being, I don't want to give away the ending, obviously, but I wanted to make sure that in the final moments of the book, everything was coming together all at once, and that all of it felt surprising, and that there were even beyond the sort of twist that you expect in this genre, that there was other things layered into it, and that just took a minute to figure out.
Oh, you make it sound so easy. I want
you.
It was
not. It was months in. It was. I think maybe 3 months when I was living in a friend's basement in Manhattan Beach, writing from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. every day for months on end of like solid 12, 13, 14-hour days, just redrafting, figuring it out, trying things, throwing things out, until. And the great thing is when you do it, when you go at it that long and that hard, you actually do kind of know when you arrive and when you're getting close, and it makes that sensation really. It's a high that's hard to replicate when you finally manage to like bring all those threads together in a way that they just kind of coalesce.
And you really did. Just for everyone out there, Stan sent me the first 2/3 of the book once. Like we knew each other and he trusted me enough to read his writing, and it was excellent. I was like, okay, now just let me read the ending. And I actually did not read it till this morning, getting prepared for this call. And it's excellent. You earned every bit of pain and torture. And so it's really encouragement for everyone out there just to be like, the suffering unfortunately is part of the process, but you push through, and it's a page turner. It is an excellent ending.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you. But yeah, we both know those long hours of sitting there, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and then at some point it does, but you never know where that point is going to come, and it's a moving target, and it's just I think we can both agree that it doesn't get easier.
It doesn't get easier now. Yeah, I'm just I finished my first TV show, and I'm like starting to try to think of another, and I'm like, this is miserable. I'm actually feeling more like where Stan was a year ago. But I think it's important that we don't take it for granted, like how
totally
hard writing is, and it's really personal. And I think that's what I love about your book, and we'll talk about like why certain things come from your life. But everyone in the world could have told you the ending was fine or it wasn't fine. but you needed to just know what it was for yourself.
Had to work for me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're kind of doing it for, I mean, of course you're writing for an audience, but it's got to hit the mark for you first and foremost.
I want you to tell the story then. So we're gonna go back from the end to the beginning, because I like to work in reverse and play with time. How you ended up with your stellar, amazing, on the edge of your seat, white knuckler of a opening to the book, because that was a process as well.
Yeah, so I had written, the book opens on this sort of like kaleidoscopic set piece. It's a very ambitious jewel robbery that's told from the vantage point of every different observer, and it happens inside the sort of luxury mall of a big casino. And you see the robbery through the eyes of a manicurist who's rolling on ecstasy at a party at the resort. You see it from the eyes of a beat cop who's, you know, assigned to that area, from the eyes of the woman working in the jewelry store who the robbers approach to open the safe, from you know, a sort of shy and very nervous 5-year-old kid who accidentally gets wrapped up in it. And I'd written that set piece, which is like 25 pages long, and I put it in the middle. And I had done sort of this slow build up to it initially, where you saw the preparation for the robbery without really understanding what it was that was being prepared. And then there was this sort of, what I thought was like a nice surprise in the middle, where you're like, holy shit, the thing that I've been watching is this epic crime that's going to go down. And you didn't really realize who everyone was until then. And then I gave the book to my agent, and her husband, who's Colson Whitehead, read it and had some really incredible notes.
You know, just that guy, yeah.
But one of his notes was, move that to the beginning. And when I did that, about 150 pages of the book, it became very clear were no longer necessary. So I moved that, and I was like, oh my God, I can cut like the middle third of this thing, which is all this backstory that I realized once you move that out to the beginning, I could move through the backstory, and there's 2 chapters of flashback, and that's it. And so it restructured the whole thing in a way that was really amazing. And it was a good, you know, it was an instinct that I had and then sort of shot down, but yeah, I think it ended up working.
And you needed to probably write the other beginning to get to this part of the process.
And that's something that happens a lot too. I mean, I think you and I have talked about this before. Like, there's a lot of stuff that you write as sort of character backstory that you need to know that the reader doesn't necessarily, or the audience doesn't necessarily need to know. So like, I needed to work through those, you know, 100 odd pages of biography for me to figure out stuff about those people, and then it could all stay on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, it's such a cool lesson, and it's also such a great opening. Like, when it's a great opening, it's sort of like an opening that inspires me to try to think of ones like this. It just throws you right in the middle. And you're like catching up, and it moves really fast. And I didn't even know the book was about it's about a jewelry heist. So like, you're like, oh, I'm going to follow one of these people, the cop, the FBI, or the little kid. And then all of a sudden you are following, you know, they're only called like helmet number 1 and helmet number 2, right? In the beginning, or rider number 1.
Right. Yeah. It's like they're right. They're numbered according to like the FBI agent who's investigating the case.
And then you find out like, oh, rider number 1 is our main character. And it's a very cinematic opening, and that's a credit to how you write it, because you can see every detail. And that also, tell us about, you know, you got the idea like for that from, I never have seen what happened in real life. Like, that's kind of inspired by a real event.
I mean, it's funny. Actually, I just did a story for Interview Magazine about sort of like the real crime that inspired it. And like the funny thing was, there was this heist in Dubai in a mall where the Pink Panthers, who are this incredible, and anyone who's even remotely interested in this should read New Yorker story by David Gran on the Pink Panthers, the most successful jewelry thieves in history. They've taken like something like $144 million over the last 30 years. And at one point, they drove 2 stolen Audi A8s into a mall in Dubai, crashed through the glass windows, drove the cars straight into this door of Graf, which is the jewelry store that gets robbed in my book, which is what inspired that. And they busted through the secure entrance with these cars, robbed the store, and then rode out. And so I wanted to do it on motorcycles because it felt a little more cinematic. And I had recently been in Vegas on business, and I just like had this image of the place getting robbed on motorcycles after seeing this Dubai video. And I thought, like, you know, it's kind of unrealistic. I don't think, like, the motorcycle thing, like in a car, you're protected. It feels like it wouldn't really happen this way. And then I was digging around. And of course, about 7 years ago, 6 guys on 3 motorcycles robbed a jewelry store in a mall in London the same way. So, I mean, it just goes to show that no matter what, everything's been done, basically.
Yeah.
As I was worried about the realism of this, I literally watched a video on YouTube of it happening. I was like, oh my God, never mind. Just kidding. I'm definitely gonna write this.
Yeah, no, that's so encouraging too, because I think as writers, especially, I don't know if you have this problem, like so much of the time I'm like, oh, this is over the top. Like, you know, the FBI isn't gonna plant something on a crime scene, and then you Google FBI plant something on a crime scene, and you're like, oh,
you're like, oh shit, the thing that I imagined has already, like a weirder version of it already happened.
Exactly, truth is stranger than fiction. But as a writer, it's encouraging to be like, oh, this thing that maybe I thought could be far-fetched is actually super real.
Totally.
Which is awesome. Tell us, all right, so I want to talk about like Jersey. So we're both from Jersey.
Yes.
And Jersey makes a great cameo. And just for everyone out there, the book is a thriller. It's a heist book, but it's also extremely character driven. And it's a romance at its center. And
it's a romance.
When I knew I loved you as a writer and not just a friend was when we got to Princeton, New Jersey, which is where you're from, right?
Yeah.
And there's a scene, I'm not going to spoil it for everyone, but there's this great scene where the love interests meet. They're meet cute, and they do something. What they're doing is like, I'm like, what the hell is this? This is amazing. Is this real? And why everyone needs to read this book is Stan. Yeah, I think it must just come from who you are. Like, you learn things in this book. I'm like, oh, people actually do that. And it's like you've like turned over all these rocks about like niche behavior and behavior, and you put it in your book. But anyway, it's full of ideas and it keeps it exciting. But tell me why you felt like the Jersey part was important to you.
I mean, niche behavior is sort of my niche. That's it's very on brand for me. But I love New Jersey. I mean, first and foremost, and I just feel like it's such fertile ground for fiction. You know, the stuff that I like. So the fact that it was set initially in Jersey came from some true crime that went down in my hometown a long time ago, where I grew up in not far from this little airport in Princeton, New Jersey, and there was this rumor that the airport was home to this like major drug trafficking operation at some point, where these people bought the airport and realized that sort of no one was paying attention, and they bought off the cops, and they were flying in kilos that would, you know, never hit the streets in New Jersey, so everyone kind of looked the other way.
Kilos of drugs, that's the translator for people out there.
And I was, you know, it sounded like bullshit to me, to be honest. But then my brother went to work for a criminal attorney who had, you know, defended the Gambinos, and he was like, no, that was totally real. And then I started asking around, and like everybody knew someone who was peripherally involved. Like my dentist had cleaned the teeth of a pilot, and I was like, oh my God, there's these insane criminals just hanging out here, living their life in Princeton. And that's where I got the idea to have Alex Cassidy, who's the main character of the book, is this jewelry thief, like having it's kind of a perfect place to go to lay low. Because as someone said to me, which I thought was really interesting, you know, I was like, is this really possible that these people could have been running drugs like this? And they were like, tell me how many people you know in this town who have money. And now tell me how many people you can actually tell me that you know what it is they do.
Yeah.
He was like, how do you know what I do? I'm a lawyer. Have you ever seen me practice law? You have no idea what I do. I could be doing anything. And I was like, oh my God, he's totally right. These people could be doing anything. And so I was like, I'm going to put this character here who does event production, as he says in Polite Company, but you know, his actual job is actually literally event production, but the events he's producing are these massive robberies. And the New Jersey suburbs are a great place for this kind of thing too, because as you know, like, I've lived all over the world. I've been living in Europe for months now. The weirdest shit that I've ever seen is in New Jersey, is happening behind closed doors in the New Jersey suburbs, as you will see from the second chapter of the book, or the first chapter, sorry, after the prologue.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this couple meets at a ketamine party at the home of a doctor who's,
yeah.
well, we'll leave it at that. But anyway, like, like
But that's the
That
part,
happens
like,
in New Jersey.
yeah, I was like, oh, so in the book, you're like, I'm in Vegas, there's heists, there's jewelry thieves, there's motorcycle chases. I'm like gripped, my heart's pounding. And then you end up in Princeton, New Jersey, and you're like, oh, this is not going to be interesting. And instantly it's interesting. And I love that idea that the suburbs like hide all these secrets that,
yeah, totally.
And you're really good at uncovering them.
It's what I spent most of my youth doing. But how to get into and out of trouble in the suburbs is
by Stan Parish. Yeah. One of the things that I was also really impressed, being a really character-driven book, is the female characters. You know, we're both men. We both write these really strong, complicated, independent, surprising women. And for me, I know that comes from a personal place that's inspired by the real women who raised me. But tell me about you, like why, because you guys, the women in this book are fascinating, interesting, full of surprises. So how did you get inspired?
I mean, I think like you, I think we both write those women in our work because that's like that, that's our experience of it. Like that, I come from an Italian family where, the women are running the show usually behind the scenes, but in a time of crisis, like they don't have time for the facade of like letting everyone think that someone else is running the show, and then it's clear that they're just in charge. So I mean, that was just my experience, and they have to clean up a lot of messes made by the men, which is what happens at multiple points in this book, where I think some of the women end up surprising themselves a little bit, but it's clear some of them, it's pretty clear that they were in charge all along.
I think that's one of the coolest things that you play with in the book, like, because this is such a genre that's so male driven historically, and maybe in real life, I don't know who's pulling off the heists, but you really do flip that on its head. And I won't give away too much. But it makes it kind of it's a book for everyone. Like you might think it's one thing, and then that's what you're really great at, is like the next moment you're like, oh, this is that kind of book. And it keeps you really turning the pages.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk. I want to ask you so many things. Oh, the title picking process. Everyone struggles with the title. Yeah.
Do you remember this nightmare? Oh,
well, I remember when I read it, I think it was called Numbered Days.
Terrible title.
No, it wasn't terrible. I was like, oh, but how did you end up with Love and Theft, which is a great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, there were a bunch of titles that I liked that other people didn't like, and we went back and forth, and finally we just ended up kind of at this impasse. And at one point they were like, you have 12 hours to figure this out. And I was in Los Angeles at the time, and I was like, shit. And I was staying in West Hollywood, and I was supposed to go to dinner at the San Vicente Bungalows, and I walked, 5 miles just the entire time typing on my phone. I almost got killed crossing.
Yeah, nobody does that in Los Angeles, as we know. The song says.
I think really well when I walk, and I was just walking, and just typing things down and down and down in this email to my agent and my editor in the UK and in New York. And finally, like, I got to the bungalows for dinner, and I still didn't have a title, and my phone was about to die. And I was like, okay, what is the book fundamentally about? And like, what is a great, like, I love that construction of like something and something, where there's like a odd juxtaposition. I was like, well, it's like a love story, and it's also about theft. And I was like, wait, that's an amazing title, but also a Bob Dylan album.
Yeah.
So I was like, can we, I like 30 suggestions in the body of an email, and the last one, I was like, can I just use a Bob Dylan album title, for Christ's sake? What about Love and Theft? Hit send. My phone died, and then I woke up the next morning, and everyone was like, oh my God, that's great. You can totally. So it was, but that came down to not only The Wire, but the last 1% of battery on my phone before my deadline. So
yeah. I think it's cool to share that story because, for aspiring writers and people who've been published, I mean, I think the title you always struggle with, and it feels like until you get the title, there's no book, or you can't market it, or you can't, even yourself, you can't see it. But I think it's like a really good lesson for people, like, just skip over the title part. Just call it Untitled until you write the book
totally.
and figure it out.
Absolutely. And then you can look back. Like, when did you come up with How to Get Away with Murder?
Like right away. No, I had the premise before and basically I was like, oh, what is she gonna call her class? Oh no, it was on a walk as well. That's another lesson for writers. When in doubt, go
walk around Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's only in Los Angeles. And getting How to Get Away with Murder. I think it was just like, oh, that's how she's gonna call her class because she's so irreverent and sly. And then and I wasn't sure it was the title. I needed someone else to tell me. I was like, it could be this. I remember pitching Shonda and she was like, well, that's your title. And it's like, okay, great. But now I like the things I currently work on, I have no freaking title, and I'll figure it out if they ever end up on TV.
Yeah, and you'll figure it out when you figure out what it's actually about, and that doesn't happen in the first draft ever.
No, that's another great lesson. Is like, don't go into it be like, I'm going to write about this specific thing because a book. I mean, I've never written a book or a novel.
Yes, you have. What are you talking about? You've totally written a book.
It's a book. Hillary and I, my friend, we wrote a guidebook. We call it a book. No, but writing, I'm fascinated by the process. I think because every television writer wants to write their own novel someday, which you've now written too, including this one. What drew you to writing novels versus writing TV or movies, which frankly seems easier? I don't think it is, but it seems like that.
I don't know. I'm definitely not sure that's true as someone who's trying to figure that stuff out right now. But I don't know. It was just the medium that I grew up on, some of the first, stories that I can remember were like Treasure Island and Kidnapped and these great, adventure novels. And I read Dog Soldiers by Robert Stone when I was way too young to read that book, but it had a huge impact on me. And for the kind of stories that I wanted to tell, it was just a medium that I loved. I read constantly when I was a kid. I mean, I'm totally fascinated by television also. And that's definitely the medium that I would like to explore next. I went to Waldorf school when I was a kid and TV was forbidden in our house. So I didn't watch a ton of it. So that was just that's what I knew, I guess.
Yeah, and it's what's so cool as a TV writer about reading your book is it's really written like a screenplay. I mean, I think it could be either, but you write in really short, direct chapters. You switch point of view, and I'm like, oh, you're like a TV writer. You're natural at this. So I would love to see any TV show you create.
Well, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. You're thinking about it, right?
But yeah, that's something I definitely borrowed from. It borrowed from the medium of TV. I remember watching The Sopranos really young and being just totally enthralled by those. David Chase always did that thing where he had 3 storylines running concurrently and he would cut back and forth. So you're constantly inserted into a different point of view. And he was just great at getting in and out of those scenes. And I think that's something that I did learn a lot from as a novelist was how enrapturing it was to just be inserted at different points of view. And, to see the same story, especially, The Sopranos did a great job of this, of telling you the same story from sort of 2 characters' point of view. You would see it as Tony sees it and you would kind of see it as Christopher sees it.
Yeah.
And that was something I really wanted to bring into my fiction that I didn't see, rather than sort of, I can't imagine having a thriller I would never want to write one in first person where you're just sort of seeing it from one person. Yeah, it's this book is in third person obviously, but it's you get even within an individual scene, you'll sort of see it through the eyes of both people at some point whenever it makes sense to shift from one camera A to camera B so you can see. It's just basically what is the most interesting part of this scene, whose eyes should I be looking through to see this? Is someone hiding something? And then I can watch it through the eyes of a person who doesn't you as the reader realize that they're not seeing everything that's going on. And then, it creates more tension and drama. So yeah, I mean, I just actually, now that we're talking about it, I was super influenced by TV as a fiction writer also.
Well, I think one, it's really interesting you picked The Sopranos because that was the first TV show I ever watched. So I was like, oh, this is like a novel. Like,
Yeah, totally. Yep.
Didn't follow, these patterns and formulas that TV did, or at least the shows I watched, until that show, and it really expanded the notion of TV. So it makes sense that it went back and forth with you.
And again, New Jersey, home state, making another appearance.
Yeah, and women controlling everything. Carmela, I always wanted Meadow to take over the business. That was probably my network TV pitch. I want to see Meadow, like David Chase. Please, can we see Meadow be the new mob boss?
Yeah, she steps up and takes over the family interest. That's a good idea.
Anyway.
Enough of our Sopranos New Jersey fanboy.
But tell me about how you decide in this switching of perspectives, what you show and what you don't show. Because I think that's what's so effective about the book is you think you know what's happening and then you switch to another person's point of view and you're like, oh, and there's a great, great twist, which is why everyone needs to read this book that I read today near the end that I totally didn't see coming because of this moment. But how do you decide what to show and what not to show?
I mean, for me, it's like taking a step back from it and asking myself, like, what as a reader would be sort of the most surprising, for the twist, which we won't go into too much detail about, obviously, but it's someone in the book who is sure that he knows who someone is, and he says it multiple times in a way that makes you as a reader, I think, buy into it. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and then that turns out to not be true at all. And yeah, in terms of figuring out who to tell from, it's kind of like I don't know, you just feel it out. Like there's a couple scenes that I wrote that you were really occupying, like Alex's perspective, the protagonist's perspective. And then I just realized that it felt kind of flat. And like at moments, like I wanted to see, like, from his love interest, like, well, like, let's get into her head for a second. And so like you see that like he's not coming off in the way that he thinks he's coming off. Just anywhere where you can like dial up the drama a little bit by shifting expectations and by, I think it was Tony Gilroy, my favorite screenwriter of all time. I think the author of the best screenplays ever. It was like, drama only works when people are lying to each other. And, even if people aren't lying to each other, they can be misrepresenting themselves in a way that's interesting. That's what really I heard that and I was like, oh, like that, like everywhere where this book feels flat to me, it's because people are telling each other the truth, or someone thinks they're coming off a certain way and they're not, or, and so just like adding those little charges in the exchanges or in, shifting perspective to keep things lively and to make it clear that everything is not what it seems, which in this genre obviously is super important if you're trying to keep people engaged with suspense.
And the really cool thing I think is, and the hard thing about writing, it's like you said with your opening, like you have to do all the work of figuring out what's happening off screen to then cut it and jump into someone else's point of view and catch up. But so when someone's quizzing you, like, well, how did that happen? Because we missed that whole part. You're like, oh, that's 100 pages of the book I can send you if you really want to know. I promise it's not going to be as good of a read, but yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And I think that's a cool thing to remind so many storytellers out there. Like, I think that's what the theme of this Facebook and the bookstore we're doing, Murder by the Book. It took me a while as a thriller writer too to be like, oh, the things I'm struggling with. And I would get to the point, I was like, if I can't write a scene, I'm cutting it. Like, I know that scene happened. Yeah. I'm just struggling because it feels exposition-y. It's like, cut it, let the audience catch up, or like, I'll do a blip, later. And I think that's why, it's so funny that we met this way, because I would have loved this book no matter what. And I would have been like, oh, I want to meet this writer. Because we both, like, you tell story in a way that I find really interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we sort of but not just as friends, but as writers, like gravitated towards each other's work so quickly. It's like that, it's like, it's that economy of storytelling that's so fucking hard to pull off.
That economy just means someone worked their ass off, spent hours, months in Manhattan Beach writing things that you never saw.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and I mean, you've had to do it in a network TV format where you're like, you know, you have a crazy time constraint to, you know, to tell a story. And you're like, you know, it's one of the things I love about How to Get Away with Murder is like you get in and out of those scenes perfectly. Like there's not a second wasted. And like that I think that's something I have to say, I think a lot of novelists could really learn from TV and film is like how to get in and out of a scene, where there's times where I'm like, you could have like, I didn't need this build up and setup. And I think that's something you do really well. Is like you drop us in there at exactly the minute that we need to be there. Like you don't, there's no fat on either end of it. It is just super lean, and you're in and you see exactly what you need to see, and you're into something else.
Well, that's so funny to hear you say, because I think most of that comes from the idea of like, oh, we have to cut 10 minutes from this episode. It was, you know, and I actually ended up loving that, because you would find like, oh, this whole thing that I thought I needed, I don't.
Yeah,
and then
it's just not necessary.
Yeah, but again, it's necessary that you've done the work to get
totally
there. So
you can't cut it if you didn't do it, and you don't know it if you haven't. Yeah, exactly.
And that's important for me to like have other writers here, because it's always editing, right? It's like writing is rewriting, and that's just a sign of that. And you showed that with, I saw all the work you put into this. Like you just like kept hacking away at it.
Kept hacking away. I mean, like in some ways, I wish someone had like some like network executive had come in and been like, you need to cut like an hour out of this.
No,
book,
you don't.
know? But it's a good exercise, because man, like if you can't put it in there, like I gotta say, like I love novels that are under 300 pages.
Yeah, me too.
You know, The Great Gatsby is 40,000 words. It's 40,000 words.
How many pages does that come out to?
Just over 200.
Yeah.
And it's like that, and like that is the economy. Like, so there are passages of beautiful writing, but they are always doing two things at once, and there's nothing in there that's not moving the story forward. Yeah, even if it's even the atmospheric stuff, it's like stuff you need to understand a character, or you know, and yeah, that's something that I really like. That's super important to me to get it.
And killing your darlings over and over.
Killing your characters off. Although I tried to kill the main character off in this book, as you know. Didn't work. That's because I think I was just mad. I just wanted to be.
Every writer has that impulse to be like, you know what? I'm just gonna kill the main character, and then I'll figure out what happens next. Definitely, I killed one of the main characters, How to Get With Murder, and people did not like it. But I think why do you think that happens? Like, why you were like, oh, you just wanted to be done with it? You're like, if I kill the main character, then I'll be done.
It's partially that, and I think it's partially just like you realize that it's gotten stale for you, and you need to mix it up and make it interesting for you again to get into it. And you're like, okay, here's the thing that I didn't expect to do. Let me, like, in the same way that people get bored with their lives and blow it up in some dramatic way. You're like, you're doing the same thing. You're like, all right, let me like hit the detonate button on this, or just like push that off the table. And see what happens. And like sometimes you need to do that just to shake it up and be like,
did anyone tell you no?
What now? Yeah. Yes. They were like,
that's James, my dog, everyone.
Oh, God.
I'm gonna give him a book.
Yeah, totally. Very, very smart people were like, I know what you're doing, and it's ill-advised at this point. So just stop. Find another way to make this interesting for you again without killing anyone unnecessarily.
Yeah, we all need help sometimes to see like out of our own destruction. Yeah.
God, that's why I'm so jealous of the writer's room process. God, there's so many times when I would have loved just like kick ideas to. I mean, and I did this to you sometimes, where I would like call you and be like, what do you think of this? Is this stupid? But yeah, it's a novel writing is a solo act at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's one of the joys of it, and it's also one of the like pretty serious downsides, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what makes it so like heroic to me, is you're just wrestling with yourself, you're talking to yourself. It's definitely easier when you can just walk down the hall and like you go to 9 writers, be like, I don't have any ideas left, and they give you a bunch. And so that's, I mean, the grass is always greener. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
I do want to mention to everyone that this book has gotten the most amazing reviews. So can you tell me, first of all, and then there's a New York Times review, which obviously is a big deal, that is so lovely and so positive and awesome and everything like I would dream of for a review. Where were you when you got that and read that?
I was actually in this apartment at this table where I'm sitting right now. They actually sent me the text of that review on my birthday. And I saw the subject line and I was like, I'm not gonna open this. I'm not like
what was the subject line? New York Times review?
It was and with an attachment. And I was like,
oh.
And I was like, don't be a pussy, just open it and see what it says. And it was a really wonderful review by a writer, Adam Sternberg, who I love, who both as a cultural critic and fiction writer, I think is tremendous. Actually, when I talked about switching genres initially with my agent, I think we talked about his books in particular being like just great, like literary thrillers that are not like, literary for the sake of being literary. He has his sentences are beautiful, but the books feel like, like he has a great, like sort of noirish book. Shovel Ready is phenomenal. And,
Did you know he was
really
reviewing it before?
I had no idea. I didn't know who it was. I knew that it was getting reviewed. I didn't know who it was going to be. So that was really, it was to have someone whose work, I really looked up to, especially when I was moving into this genre.
Yeah.
It was cool.
And did you celebrate? It was your birthday.
I did. We went, yes, we had a long and champagne-soaked day after that.
Yeah.
And then I had to write a story for the Wall Street Journal the next day. So I had to snap out of it.
But there's always a new thing to write.
Never ends. But no, yeah, that was really gratifying.
I bet I was more happy than you were, because I think knowing you, sometimes it's just easier to enjoy someone else's success. But I was prepared. It's like, who cares about the reviews? Like, you're proud of your book. You worked so hard on Stan. I love it. That's important. And you've gotten just these amazing stellar reviews, and I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. It's been really nice to see.
So it just proves like we both have really good taste, I think.
There you go.
Cheers.
I'm out of wine.
I guess because I'm treating this as like we're sneak peek behind the scenes of like what it is to publish a novel. The other cool thing is, I don't know if you've all seen this beautiful cover. Stan has not in person, but I think I know like when I wrote that book, we did send back a lot of covers. We were like, we need better. And I know you did the same thing. So tell us about how you knew this was the right one.
It wasn't working, and it wasn't working, and in this, in a way, it's like the writing process. I was like, nope, and then they signed Jaya, who did that cover, who has done some just absolutely phenomenal covers, and it was basically like, whatever this is what we're gonna go with. And I was like, well, let's see how it is. And then it came in, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. She nailed it. I just remember that feeling of like, again, of like opening the email with like one eye and being like, what is this going to be like? And it just like this sigh of relief. I was like, yep, there you go. I have to say the UK cover is also very cool. Very different vibe, but with that book they will be out in the UK next year in hardcover.
All right, cool. How did you feel bad saying no? Because that's like, you're like, okay, I wrote the book, I don't have an expertise in that, or no?
No, I edited magazines for years. So I've been telling people that I hated their cover ideas I have a lot of practice telling people that it's a shitty idea for a cover. No, I mean, I like, at the Wall Street Journal, especially, I signed a lot of like conceptual covers that were not like traditional celebrity magazine covers. So like, and like, it's the kind of thing where like you definitely develop an eye for it, but like, if it works the second you see it. And if it's not working, it's just a gut check. It's like, I can look at it for 20 minutes and tell you why it's not working, but like the yes or no is instant. And that, I was thrilled with the way that came out.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap this up, because I see John. That ultimately, like, it's how we started, really. Like, your gut, only you, the writer, alone in your head, can tell you whether it's good enough or done enough. And I think that's such a good lesson. I know I always knew
Amen.
that lesson, like just
Totally.
go by yourself and like, do you like it? And then if you like it, it's done. And you
Right.
did it.
Thank you.
Love and theft.
With great help and advice from friends like you.
Yeah.
Pete, I'm glad that you talked about the cover, because you guys who are watching it can't see it because you don't have it. But like, I mean, it's got all these layers to it. Like you look at it and there's all the like the little buildings are actually in the jewel. It's a really great cover, which you don't see that at first when you look at it, but the longer you look at it, you see kind of those little details. It's fantastic.
Love it.
So if you guys joined us late, we've been talking with Stan Parish about his book, Love and Theft. If you missed the first part of the video, once we're done chatting, Facebook will have it all available on our live feed. We'll also be uploading it to YouTube in the next couple of days, so we'll be able to check it out there as well. So I have a couple of questions from the crowd that popped up while you guys were chatting. So, so as I mentioned, we did an event with John Fram last night for his book, The Bright Lands. And which is a fantastic
book, which you should all read.
Yeah, and so you guys can catch his video in our Facebook feed too. So his question was, you know, suffering is definitely a part of the practice, but what portion of the book did you find the most joy in writing?
Oh man, John, great question from a great writer. Yeah, the Bright Lands, which I read earlier this year, I absolutely love, by the way. It is a crazy, creepy thriller about a small town Texas football team and the sort of horrors that are going on behind the scene. God, the part, I mean, I have to say the opening set piece was enormously fun to write. You know, it went through a lot of different iterations, but just being able to, because in a way it was emulate a thing that I really love, which is the opening of like great heist movies like Heat, for example. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie by Michael Mann, but it's like there's this amazing heist where you see it primarily through the eyes of the robbers. You know, obviously, you know, it's their perspective from the start. You watch them prepping for the job and doing the job. And I love that scene. And I was just thinking of the way, like, how can I do this? What is a way that I could approach a scene like this that you can't do in a film? And like, this was the answer, to be like inside the head. Cause I was like thinking about specifically, like, if there's a guard who gets murdered in that scene. And I was like, what was that guy thinking when he like went for his gun as they're holding up the truck? And I was like, you know, it would actually be really interesting to do a scene in a robbery where you're in the experience of all these people around it who are some of them are terrified and some of them are excited. And there's, you know, there's all these sort of different like registers of emotion. And it's like, also just a cool way to watch the action, and it keeps things moving fast. So that I really enjoyed. There is a long stretch in the middle where Alex and Diane are in Tulum, Mexico with their 2 adult children, which was fun just because it's a place that I have been visiting for years and really love. And it was great to just sort of like occupy it. And like, that was one part of the book where definitely I think it was both my agent and my editor were like, these parties in Tulum, we could cut them back a little. Like, come on, we get it. Like, move on. But that also was a lot of fun to write. So I would say the ending was miserable to write. So yeah, definitely the beginning, everything but the end was a lot of fun.
So one of the things that John also said last night, and Dennis, who was with Scared Straight Reads, who was also moderating with us, said that one of the things that they loved about the book is it really felt like kind of this old school thriller in a way that people kind of aren't writing those kind of heist thrillers anymore, but kind of in a really cool, modern, updated way. So who are some of your kind of reading influences? Did you read a lot of those kind of thrillers before?
You know what? Funny you should ask. I just reread, actually the day the book came out, I was in Ibiza on the beach and I was like, I just want to read. I'm going to turn my phone off for like a couple hours and just reread something that I really love. And the book that I always return to is The Hunter by Donald Westlake, writing as someone else. He wrote it under a pen name. I can't remember what it's called. Yes, Richard Stark. Thank you. Exactly. And that I think is that's you know, I think as John Banville said, like, his novels are not just the great thrillers, they're like some of the most assured fictions ever written in any genre, period. And that book had a huge impact on me, both for its, you know, it's a heist novel technically, but it's also this like revenge story, and it's just beautifully written. That was I wanted to do sort of a modern update on that because his depictions of women in that book are, you know, it's like sort of like noirish, kind of cartoonish almost. Like if you could find any fault with that book, that would be the thing. So I wanted to do something sort of in that vein, but where, you know, the women are real characters as opposed to like the kind of bimbos in some of Donald Westlake's fiction. But I would say that was a huge influence on me. Dog Soldiers by Robert Stone, which I mentioned before, which won the National Book Award in 1975, making it, I would argue, the greatest thriller ever written. Is I love like the sort of weird psychedelic San Francisco, you know, 60s culture that he brings into the book, and it just gives that like thriller a whole new flavor. So like I wanted to add some of that into Love and Theft, and that book also for the, you know, the way that you inhabit the different characters is really phenomenal. And I think at times the pacing feels really slow, and it's just, you know, the writing is beautiful and you can get into it, and then he like knows just when to like pull that taut and really go for it. I would say those are my two big influences for this book.
And Pete, so working on a show like How to Get Away with Murder, when you're reading, do you read thrillers as well?
I love thrillers. I want to read more. So like I go to Stan and I'm like, tell me about a good book. But yes, because as writers, I'm just inspired by other writers. And I think besides for taking a walk, one of the things that's really helpful when you're stuck or you need ideas is just to read. Because it's like your cousins. You're like, oh, this is how this person did it. And
Totally.
it kind of takes the mystery out of how to do it. But yeah, any thrillers, send them my way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Bryce asks, what portion of the book was easier to write, the love story or the theft part of it?
The theft, definitely. The love story is, you know, it's a little complicated. It's not like this isn't like a rom-com where everything goes great for everyone. And I guess I was fortunate enough to have like a decent amount of failed relationships to pull from. So, you know, you can figure out like, you know, how are these people gonna fight? Because I did not want that to be easy. I wanted their romance to feel really earned in the end, where they're like, there's some early deception that obviously she's pissed about. And, you know, how do they get past that? Do they get past that fully? Like maybe not. So yeah, I would say the love story was in the beginning, like the meet cute at the weird drug party was really fun and easy to write. But then like as it got more, you know, I did it a couple different ways before it felt real to me, that like, you know, like this is how these people have both been, you know, have both been married before, they both have kids, and like they're feeling each other out. Like they're, you know, they're not just going into this. I mean, they do go into it a little bit headlong, but they're, you know, they're obviously both very intelligent and cautious people. So like, how would two people like that in this situation relate to each other? And especially when one of them is for, you know, the first couple pages of the book, keeping an enormous secret that he's this criminal mastermind, and the woman that he's interested in is like fundamentally a very moral person. And like, how does she react to that when she finds out that this, you know, that this man she has feelings for is the head of this giant criminal enterprise? So yeah, that definitely took a lot more time and tweaking than I kind of knew the rough outlines of the crime stuff that I wanted to write, but the relationship between Alex and Diane took me a minute to get right.
Trisha says, you guys were talking kind of about one of the great things about TV is kind of the brevity and being able to tell stories in such a short period of time. So she says, with brevity being a topic, have you considered writing short stories?
I have never considered, I don't know how to do that, to be honest. I was in like, I was studying fiction with one of my favorite writers, Alexander Chi at Wesleyan. And, you know, it was like a short, you know, it was a class where in theory we were supposed to like turn in short stories, and like I wrote a novel over the course of however many weeks. And then I took another fiction class and I essentially did the same thing. I don't know why. I read short stories and I love short stories, and I'm always amazed by writers who are able to do that well. It just feels for me like if I find characters that I'm really interested in, I want to get to know them, and I want to like, you know, torture them, and, you know, like do all kinds of things with them over the course of something longer. Like I really want to stretch my legs and just get to know those people. I keep hoping that I'll have like a great idea for a short story and I'll be interested in writing it, but it just hasn't happened yet. So yeah, I don't know.
So if you guys are watching, I'm dropping links in the chat for like the Richard Stark books. You know who that is. He just mentioned Alexander Chee, who his novel Queen of the Night is one of my absolute favorites of all time. So I'm dropping links in the comments so you guys can check those out.
Was that your staff pick that I saw in Murder by the Book
yeah.
the other day? That's
yeah.
I mean, Alex Chee I learned like a sizable chunk of what I know from him. He's incredible, both as a reader, both as a novelist and as a teacher. You can learn plenty just from reading his books.
So Pat says, and you talked a little bit about this kind of bouncing ideas back and forth with Pete about whether things are working or not, but do you work with beta readers while you're writing a novel?
I do and I don't. My agent is usually the first person who I really show to. She has just like tremendous eye and instinct for this stuff. But I do, I really found, Love and Theft, I was working at the Wall Street Journal for most of the time I was writing Love and Theft. So it took me a while. And during that time, I was fortunate to find a couple of people who just in talking about books with them, I realized that they really had, they had great instincts. Like a friend of mine who's a lawyer in New York, who I met at a dinner party, and we got to, and we just in talking about books, I was like, would you mind reading a draft of this novel? And he was like, totally. And he gave me excellent notes. So yeah, I mean, I've been doing more and more of that. And I think it's great to get different perspectives. I had a cop read the crime scene, or a detective from Chester, PA, read the crime scenes just to make sure that I wasn't getting anything wrong about the investigative process. It's really important to me to get that stuff right. And I worked in magazines where there's this like rigorous fact-checking process for years. So the fact that there's no fact-checking process for fiction, I want to make sure that the stuff that needs to be factual is. So yeah, I mean, I'm using a mixture of people whose instincts I like and whose work I really like, like Pete, you can't find a good guy who writes better twists and reversals than Pete Nowalk. So it was great to have him,
Not factual though. I'm really impressed that you gave your book to a police officer. I would never give How to Get Away with Murder to a lawyer. Anyway, keep.
So Tricia also asked, you mentioned kind of working at magazines and working at newspapers. Is it challenging to switch from writing to articles for like more frequently for publications to crafting a novel? Is it hard to switch back and forth?
Yeah, it was difficult to write fiction after long days of editing magazine stories. That was really draining. Although I will say being an editor makes you an infinitely better writer, because when you're spotting errors in other people's work, like often the things that frustrate me most that other writers do that I don't like are also things that I do sometimes, which I think we all know from our personal lives as well. And it just makes you, it just sharpens your instinct, and you can see. I think I have to edit a little bit less because I've worked as an editor and I'm editing a little bit as I go. Now, the problem with that is that you can wind up editing too much as you go and interrupting your own flow as a writer. So at a certain point, you have to turn that part of your mind off and just like let it go and fix it later. Double-edged sword. But yeah, it was hard to switch back and forth. I have to say, having left the journal a little while ago, I've found it easier to work creatively since then.
So I know that Love and Theft has just come out. It's only out in a couple of days, but what do you have coming up next?
I'm working on a TV pilot idea, and another book, which I've just started to sort of imagine in the past couple days. I've been writing a bunch of like essays and nonfiction pieces, some related to the book, some not related to the book. But yeah, I have this TV pilot idea from a story that I sort of stumbled on while I was reporting a profile for the Wall Street Journal, that I'm really invested in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you came in late, we've been talking with Stan Parish, whose novel Love and Theft just came out. We've got copies at Murder by the Book. We are still closed for browsing, but we're offering curbside pickup and online and mail orders, you can visit us at murderbooks.com to order copies. Pete, thank you so much for chatting with us tonight. This has been really great. Stan, congratulations on the novel. You guys have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you.
Thank you both.